Hi, I'm Stuart. Welcome to my channel. Thanks for watching my video. In this video I'm going to give my reading wrap up for the week of July 14th through July 20th. I completed 2 books this week, so I'm going to give reviews for those books. I read parts of 2 other books. I'm going to talk briefly about those 2 books. And I got 2 new books, so I'm going to talk briefly about those 2 books. And I'm also going to talk about a Wobble I'm working on and maybe some other stuff in my life. The first book I completed was The Crown Games of Ancient Greece by David Lunt. Before I talk about the book, I'm going to give a brief author bio. I actually didn't find this at the back of the book. They didn't have a bio in the book, but did find one at Barnes & Noble in the page for the book. David Lunt is Associate Professor of History at Southern Utah University, where he teaches ancient history and conducts research on the role of sports in society. His scholarship on ancient athletics has appeared in numerous publications, including the Journal of Olympic Studies, the Journal of Sports History, and the Bloomsbury Companion to the Philosophy of Sports. This book talks about the Crown Games of ancient Greece. The Crown Games were the Olympian Games, the Nemean Games, the Isthmian Games, and the Pythian Games. Before reading this book, I was only aware of the Olympic Games. I was also unaware that the games were more than athletic contests. These sites were religious sites. They were used year-round. The games were only every 4 years or every 2 years. I think the Olympian Games and the Pythian Games were every 4 years, and the Nemean Games and the Isthmian Games were every 2 years. Each of the sites had a shrine to one of the Greek gods. 2 of the sites had shrines to Zeus. One had a shrine to Apollo, and one had a shrine to Poseidon. They also worshipped other gods at the sites too. And each of the sites had a hero shrine. The boys and young men were actually mythological, but they were worshipped. And I don't mean to imply that the worshippers knew they were mythological. They worshipped them as if they had been living beings. In addition to the athletic contests, there were musical contests, drama contests, poem contests, and more which took place at certain points in the games. There weren't these contests at all the games throughout their history, but just at points in the history of the games. The game sites were also locations that dignitaries, military officials, and others met to have discussions about various topics. This book is a scholarly work. There is a lot of discussion about archaeological digs, about the readings of intellectuals from that period that applied to the games. The book presents differing views on certain topics of the games. In other words, if people disagree, they present both of the views and generally say which is the more likely one. There was a chapter discussing some of the most well-known athletes of the games. The reports of those athletes tended to be partly factual and partly mythological. Some of their accomplishments were exaggerated. It was viewed that the victors at the games, winning the games, was sort of a path toward immortality for them. I found the book a little difficult to read at points. It took a very facts-based approach, and it probably had to do so. But because of that, I found that I would lose interest at points. I recommend this book for someone who really wants to learn a lot of in-depth history about these games. I think I'm a little more casual in that regard, so maybe I wasn't the ideal reader of the books, or possibly it's because I'm a novice at reading about ancient history at this point. I recommend this book to those who have a strong desire to learn about the history of the Crown Games and who like a scholarly, fact-based approach. For more casual readers like myself, I'm not sure if the book would be for them. Next, I want to read a short passage from the book so you can get an idea of the writing style. This is actually from the beginning of chapter 1. Titled Athletics in Ancient Greek Society, this passage. Ancient Greece featured a highly competitive culture steeped in contests of all kinds, From their earliest written records, the ancient Greeks described a society well-versed in competition and victory. The earliest poets, Homer and Hesiod, traditionally dated to the 8th century BCE, both display this competitive focus in their works. The two competitive poems attributed to Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, feature athletic contests for their heroes to show off their strength and ability. In Book 8 of the Odyssey, the hero Odysseus demonstrates his athletic prowess to his host Phoenicians by throwing a discus further than any other man and then challenging any would-be rivals to compete against him in nearly any other contest. Homer devotes the entirety of Book 23 of the Iliad to describing the athletic contest sponsored by Achilles on the occasion of Patroclus' funeral. These two accounts are our earliest written records of ancient Greek athletic contests. The events include running, boxing, wrestling, and chariot race, amongst others. Homer's epic focused on the great deeds and adventures of the heroes involved in the Trojan War. However, Hesiod's works and Days offers a more ordinary point of view of life in the early archaic period. And like Homer's, his poetry reveals the importance of competition. In Works and Days, Hesiod boasts of his own victory in a poetry contest as part of the funeral games held for a ruler named Amphidamas at a site in northern Greece. Clearly, even in the earliest days of the archaic period, in the earliest surviving written sources, the Greeks were keen to compete. The second book I completed this week is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Before I give my review of the book, I want to read a brief author bio, which is from the dust jacket in the back of the book. Rebecca Yarros is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of more than 15 novels, with multiple starred publishers' weekly reviews and a Kirkus Best Book of the Year. A second-generation Army brat, Rebecca loves military heroes and has been blissfully married to hers for more than 20 years. She's the mother of 6 children, and she and her family live in Colorado with their stubborn English bulldogs, 2 feisty chinchillas, and a cat named Artemis who rules them all. Having fostered, then adopted their youngest daughter, Rebecca is passionate about helping children in the foster system through her nonprofit, 1 October, which she co-founded with her husband in 2019. To learn more about their mission, visit oneoctober.org. To catch up on Rebecca's latest releases and upcoming novels, visit RebeccaYarros.com. This book is described as a romantasy. It stars Violet Sorrengail. The kingdom which she lives in has been at war with a neighboring kingdom for around 400 years. In her kingdom there is a war college with 4 quadrants. They're the Riders Quadrant, the Scribe Quadrant, the Healer Quadrant, and the Infantry Quadrant. Violet's mother is a general in the military. Her father was a scribe who he died before the book started. When citizens of Violet's kingdom reach age 20, they go into one of the quadrants. The Rider Quadrant is mostly volunteer. The other quadrants, people are conscripted in. From a young age, Violet trained to be a scribe, but about 6 months before her conscription date, her mother informed her that she had to go to the Rider College because any member of her family had to go to the Rider College. Violet's brother and sister had also gone through the Rider College and got through it. The Rider College is very difficult to get through. What it does is trains people to the point where there's what they call a threshing, and at the threshing, dragons pick some of the riders to be their rider. The dragons are intelligent. They possess power that they can channel through their riders. The Rider Quadrant is very violent. Even getting into it is, people die just getting into it. With the exception when you're sleeping, you can be killed at any time by any other trainee. With about 6 months to go before the date she has to go to one of the quadrants. Violet's mother told her that she has to go to the rider quadrant. So she has only 6 months to catch up on what many have taken their whole life to train for. She also has a condition where her bones are brittle and her ligaments are loose, which means in addition to the brittle bones, her bones can get out of alignment. And also she's small. 5 years ago, there was a rebellion by members of the kingdom, and the parents were killed and executed while their children watched, and their children were required when they reached age 20 to go into the rider quadrant. And the most lethal of these children is a man called Zayden Ryerson. He's a third year. You go through this into this quadrant for 3 years, and then you're sent out to various military outposts. He's in his third year, and he commands a whole wing. And his father was the head of the rebellion, so he hates Violet's mother, and by extension, he hates Violet. And Violet is warned to stay away from him. The story goes from there. Before I give my opinion on the book, just want to talk about some issues that people might have with the book. Although, on the one hand, there's some very impressive world building, there's some noticeable holes in the world building too. Violet thinks about sex a lot, including sometimes when she's actually in mortal danger. There are some very spicy scenes in the book. They're graphic. I wouldn't say they're crude though, and I do believe that they're necessary for the advancement of the plot. I found the writing a little confusing a fair amount of the time. I would have to stop and think about what was said, or I have to go back a little bit because something would be said and I didn't really remember where it was, and I didn't always find the reference. Of these 4 issues that I found, the last one was the only one that really concerned me. The others didn't really concern me. I found that Violet is a great heroine. I loved her, and I found that I loved the characters that I was supposed to, and I disliked the characters or hated the characters that I was supposed to hate. I thought the author did a great job coming up with ways that Violet could succeed in challenges that made sense considering the issues she had, her smallness, her lack of training, her brittle bones, the ligament issues. And I suppose a little suspension of disbelief was necessary, but that's probably always the case. This is, in fact, a fantasy. There are dragons after all. I thought the story itself was great, despite what I said about finding the writing confusing on occasion. Once I got some ways in the book, I found the book hard to put down. I just wanted to know what was going to happen. There were a lot of twists and turns. It was like I intended to read for a certain amount of time, and I would just go beyond that time. And I really found it quite exciting, quite thrilling. This is one of the best books I've read this year, and I expected to like it, but I didn't expect to like it as much as I did. I will say that I think this book is best suited for those who come at it from the romance angle. I read a fair amount of fantasy, but I also read a fair amount of romance. If you came at it from the fantasy angle, the things I said maybe about the some holes in the world building, that might be more of a concern of yours than it was to me. If you do come at this book from a fantasy angle, if you bought this book didn't know anything about it, you'd understandably think it was a fantasy book first for a while. If you come at it from that angle, just be aware that it might not have the detailed world building, or at least the fully fleshed out world building you're used to. And people should take into account the issues I talked to above in consideration of whether they get this book or not. I expected to like this book, but I'm a little surprised to say that this is definitely one of the best books I've read this year. And I think I'd have to read a lot of really good books in the remainder of the year for this not to be in the top 10 of my books when I'm done with the year. I'm definitely going to pick up book 2, Iron Flame, soon, and try to read it soon too, because I knew some stuff about this book before I read it. It didn't take away from my enjoyment of it. But so far I don't really know anything about Iron Flame, which is a little surprising. I do know there's some people that I really respect their opinions, though, thought it was okay and they're not continuing the series, and that concerns me a little bit. But I am going to read it. I thought this was a difficult book for me to rate because I would say my enjoyment was 5 stars, but I couldn't totally overlook the issues I talked about, so I ended up settling on 4.5 stars, which is still a very good rating. Next, I'm going to read a short passage from the book so you can get an idea of the writing style. This is Chapter 1, just the beginning of Chapter 1. Conscription Day is always the deadliest. Maybe that's why the sunrise is especially beautiful this morning, because I know it might be my last. I tighten the straps of my heavy canvas rucksack and trudge up the wide staircase of the stone fortress I call home. My chest heaves with exertion, my lungs burning by the time I reach the stone corridor leading to General Sorrengail's office. This is what 6 months of intense physical training has given me, the ability to barely climb 6 flights of stairs with a 30-pound pack. I'm so fucked. The thousands of 20-year-olds waiting outside the gates in through Chosen Quadrant for service are the smartest and strongest in Nevaeh. Hundreds of them have been preparing for the Riders Quadrant, the chance to become one of the elite since birth. I had exactly 6 months. The expressionless guards lining the wide hallway at the top of the landing avoid my eyes as I pass, but that's nothing new. Besides, being ignored is the best possible scenario for me. Basquiat War College isn't known for being kind to, well, anyone, even those of us whose mothers are in command. I have to say, too, that Violet's mother isn't going to win any Mother of the Year contest in my estimation. Now I'm just going to talk about the 2 books that I read part of this week. I started both this week. The first is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. I borrowed the audiobook from Libby. It took me a long time to get it. There was a big waiting list. Postponed it 2 times, which puts you just behind the next person in line. But the 3rd time I decided I should get it and read it. I didn't postpone it because I didn't want to read it. I postponed it because I got so many other books that I'm reading and should read. I'm about a quarter of the way in the book. The book is about 8.5 hours, so I'm about 2 hours and 9 minutes in. This story is about a woman whose friend, and calling her a friend is kind of loose considering the way she views her, but the woman's friend dies and she takes a manuscript from her friend and tries to sell it as her own. It's told in the first person perspective from the woman trying to sell the manuscript as her own. All I'll say is that I don't know how this is going to end up, but being in the head of this woman, it's like, I really hope that she gets her comeuppance in this book, because she is just not a very nice person, and the way she justifies her actions is well, it's disturbing to me. The second book I started this week is The First Physical Culturist, Ancient Greek Athletics Training Competition by Dr. Alex Daulat. This is a book that I got the idea for from Justin at Triumphal Reads. I also got the idea for him for the Crown Games of Ancient Greece that I talked about a little earlier. This book focuses more on the training, well, as you could tell from the title, the training of the athletes. I've only read a little bit of it, but it's going to talk about their training and how that could be applicable to modern times too. So this is kind of going to be interesting, I think. I wasn't able to get it at Libby. I wasn't able to get it at Hoopla, which is not surprising. There's a lot of stuff they don't have. What was surprising is I couldn't get it at Barnes & Noble. It just didn't show on their site. But I was able to borrow it from Kindle Unlimited, so that was good. Next I'm going to talk about a couple of new books I got this week. The first is the one that I just talked about, the First Physical Culturist, Ancient Greek Athletics Training Competition by Dr. Alex Daulat. That is, I said, I borrowed from Kindle Unlimited. The second book I got this week is Rocannon's World by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is a book that I borrowed on Libby. I borrowed the audiobook. I learned about this book from a video by Pat at Book Chat by Pat. She's a host and is taking part in an event called Rocket Summer, where the participants read science fiction books from different eras, like the 40s, 50s, 60s, and so on. I've been thinking about reading something by Ursula K. Le Guin before. It's possible, perhaps likely, I did as a kid. My favorite genre when I was a kid was science fiction, but I'm not absolutely positive if I read from her. This is her first book, I believe. It's going to be interesting. It's about 5.5 hours, the audiobook, so it's a shortish book. And next I want to talk about a Wobble I'm working on. The Wobble I'm working on is One Mystery Donut. This is, you don't actually know which one you're getting. The package just says a mystery donut, and it's just random what one you might get. The one I got is a cat donut, which is good because I really like cats. I'm not done with it yet. This is the what it looks like. Have the eyes, the whiskers, the little nose on it. And I've done there's ears, and I've done one of the ears, which is here. I got to do another and then put both of them on, and then I'll be done. I might be done today. If I am, I will put a photo in of it when I put the footage of this video together and edit it. Other than that, kind of the stuff I do most weeks. Walked a couple times at the mall. I did actually have kind of a milestone in that way. It's not a milestone for my life, but for the first time since before COVID, I walked 6.6 miles, which is pretty good, at least at my age, and at a pretty brisk pace too. I went out to eat at a few places, watched some WNBA games. So kind of a typical week for me. Watched a lot of BookTuber videos. How did your reading week go? And how did your week go in general? I'd be interested to hear in the comments. If you'd be interested in telling me, please add your reply to the comments. If you enjoy this video, please give it a like. Please subscribe. Please hit the bell to be notified when I upload future videos. Hope you have a wonderful reading week, and I hope you have a wonderful week in general.